I think I want to just set the scene in terms of when the retreat happened. It was the week of the Trump tariffs being announced, and so the amount of, I guess, uncertainty in the room on any given day, or the Thursday and Friday, was quite high. We had a number of members having to leave to deal with the sort of the risk management aspect, and of course now here we are, sort of a month later, and things are slightly different, although still that uncertainty prevails. So to look at, I think. We start, as I think some of you will know, with some sort of word clouds, a sentiment tracker, if you like, and some of the key words that came out, I think, do set the scene for the tone of the day and a half that we were there. Mariam, are you able to sort of show those up on the screen coming up? I'll talk along there, and really, I think no one would be surprised, but I think the amount of change from the previous retreat we had in November, and I'll come on to some stats around that in a second, was quite surprising. So, I mean, I don't know if you can see there, challenging, uncertainty. So these were a one word to describe your kind of business outlook for the next 12 months. So a little bit uncertain there. Some people being very bold and putting in opportunity, but I think if you look at the biggest risk for the business, recession and Trump tariffs, and the geopolitical aspect was kind of very much writ large over the conversations that we were having. We did look into tech, into leadership, into various sizes and strategic levers for growing businesses. But I think this I want to just put it clear that this geopolitical sort of uncertainty was sitting over most of the conversations that were had. If we can look at the next slide, sort of very briefly, the key headlines, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, and I'll bring in some of my colleagues. So yeah, the operating landscape in Asia, disruption being the norm. I think that pace of change is very key. All the conversations I'm having with members is around the speed that they need to react with their businesses, with stakeholder management, and with sort of strategy conversations around what next, and they're having to be agile in many ways. The geopolitical risk, economic uncertainty, and the technology change. The last few retreats we've had, AI in particular has been a very common conversation. Still not getting any huge business cases where people are saying this has changed our business outlook, or this is really where we're setting the strategy, but more integration, I guess. And Coco will talk about that in a short while. But 30% of APAC-based businesses are using AI to streamline operations. In terms of transactions, M&A appetite is there. There's money, but confidence is fragile, and that uncertainty again is sitting over that. Don't want to go too much into the next slide. I think we all know where we are in terms of, or where we're not in terms of the sort of tariffs, trade wars, and global trade tensions. But on the next slide, I think we can see this was what started the day, and in fact, Matthew Blagg and some of our board mentors, someone came in from the US, we had someone from the UK, we had members from Singapore and Hong Kong, and I thought it was a really interesting scene setter around where the different geographies were seeing things and where they saw things going. And in fact, obviously, China remaining central to that conversation. If you look at this is the sort of sentiment tracker which really surprised me. If you look at the difference, the change there between the blue and the orange, between just November and April, I mean, that's a huge difference in terms of confidence, in terms of sort of positivity, in terms of maybe even investment strategies around where businesses were, and then where they were sort of a few months later in April. That I don't think we've seen that amount of shift, that in change in any of our retreats, UK, Asia. So I found that quite surprising, and I'd be interested in people's comments on that as we open up the floor later on, and we can share those results with you as well. But yeah, certainly the backdrop of the geopolitical and then risk management, and there were lots of questions around either as an executive, what questions will my board be asking me, or should they be asking me, and how do I respond? And then from a board point of view, how quickly do we respond? do we want to get a statement out there straight away and respond, and then have to retrace our steps in a couple of days' time? It's that sense of where do we go, and how quickly do we do it? So I think there are lots of conversations around that. But the point around the compliance view of risk management is very much shifting to strategic priority. Around that sort of leadership and governance point, I think this is where the technology conversation came in. And we looked at AI integration, impact, and then the role of the board and leadership. And at this point, I think I'd like to bring in Coco, because Coco, you chaired a panel on this topic, and I think it's probably best if you sort of give an overview of some of the outtakes and some of the key findings that you had. So if I can hand over to you for this one.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So yes, in my panel, we talk about AI technology transformation, and it's really clear that AI emerging technology are no longer just topics for the CTO to talk about behind the scenes or handle behind the scenes, because right now the boards actually need to understand what these technologies are, what can they do, and then how can they actually align those technology with the company's bigger picture and their strategy. And also we talk about it's not really enough just to have one designated AI expert in a room, because every board member is supposed to have a knowledge of AI, because simply all the decisions being made right now all relate to every part of the business, from the operations, innovation to ethics and long-term strategy. And I think another thing that we also touch on was the risks of ignoring AI or treating it like a side issue. Because if a company couldn't really keep up with it, and then they might have a high chance to lose the relevance really quickly. And also at the same time, if they're diving in without the careful oversight, and that will also cause some really serious issues such as a privacy bias or workforce impact or regulatory compliance. So we discussed that's why AI really need to be the part of the regular board conversation. It's not just for the growth opportunity, but also for the strategic imperative, because all the organization's long-term success will also depend on it. And I think on top of it, the board structure and the skills are really evolving at the moment. It's all because the increasing pressure to have the right expertise and diversity to tackle all the challenges that the leaders have at the moment. So that's why we discuss the succession planning and ongoing education is really critical at the moment, especially around the emerging technology like AI. So right now, because the boards are being asked to drive its transformation, they cannot just be really like reactive. They have to be proactive. They have to be agile and also have foresight to understand how the technology will really reshape the business. Because obviously, staying ahead of rapid change and raising stakeholder expectation is really essential at the moment. So I think that's a key highlights from my session. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much indeed, and interesting to see the adoption of sort of AI type roles in businesses. And John, I know is on the call here, and recently Standard Chartered, whose board John sits on, is have appointed an AI enablement global head, I believe, which shows the levels that companies are going to really embed this into the business. Maybe John, I could bring you in a bit later on just to maybe have a few words around that. The next one of the next sessions we ran was looking at the family-owned business, which is obviously very prevalent in APAC, and we had a member from Hong Kong talking about some of the key skills that are needed and how they differentiate between his experience in a multinational. There's some sort of key outtakes there. Nothing that will surprise people, but it was good to hear that sort of brought to life, and particularly again, I guess from a board point of view, how those skills and I guess the EQ is needed to be brought maybe a bit more to the fore in certain businesses. Obviously, it's different for different businesses, but there was a really interesting conversation around that. If we move on to the next slide, and Holly, if I can bring you in on this one, because high performance in a world of mixed signals. This was really a panel you chaired very ably, and we got some really good outtakes from this. So again, moving over to you, maybe you could give us a bit more of an insight into this panel and some of the key outtakes.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Michael, and to yourself and Coco for the really comprehensive overview so far as well. And good afternoon, everyone else. Great to see you on here. I think this session, I mean, we had a really powerful lineup of speakers. So group CPO and then two CEOs as well. And really the two headline themes underpinning it were pace and uncertainty. I think the one comment around pace is that the pace of change at the moment, where things are evolving so quickly, it often leads to really reactive leadership. And overemphasis on speed can also lead to people making mistakes. So there was a great comment around businesses needing to be fast followers. So rather than being the first person and organization to do everything, the decisions that you make need to be really aligned to the capability that you have internally. So see what your peers are doing well and then follow fast to that. Um, and there was a lot of kind of conversations around communication as well, because I think there's a real need to kind of prioritize in this sort of environment and communicating kind of a really clear set of goals. So, for example, these are five things that we want to achieve, and these are five things that you need to really avoid. I think I guess what not to do is just as critical as what to do in this sort of environment. And I mean, it says on the slide there, but that kind of articulation of intentional restraint is really important. And making sure as well that the skills and capability that you have internally are really aligned to the business becoming quite future fit as well. Um, One other thing I think worth mentioning is the relationship between the CEO and CPO when it comes to kind of leadership capability in this environment. And historically, a lot of that kind of conversation would have been left to the people function, whereas at the moment we are seeing that the CEO is really kind of driving that agenda as well. So the relationship between CEO and CPO being really a strategic lever to pull in order to stay ahead. And from a people perspective, making sure that the conversation and talent strategy evolves from kind of being performance based to actually being potential based and looking at individuals' kind of growth trajectories and the mindset that they have as well. I'll stop there, but overall, a really high impact session, which I really enjoyed sharing. So thank you, Michael. I'll pass back to you now.
Thanks very much, Holly. I think yeah, that relationship between the CEO and CPO, we're seeing instances where it's gone very right and it goes well, and instances where it's not gone so well. But also, I think the CEO and the customer relationship is in an interesting place right now. A lot of that is enabled by technology, but there's also that need to get closer to the customer and understand what they want. Look, we've whizzed through what was a really packed day and a half. There was a couple of pop-up boards. There was some masterclass sessions. There was obviously a great dinner. So all of that, conversations were happening as usual. But I really wanted to get to the sort of the key outtakes. I mean, the environment in APAC is volatile. We've got geopolitical risks, economic uncertainty, rapid technological change. M&A activity is strong. We had something like, I think it was like 59% of leaders were planning deals in the next year, but confidence is fragile due to the US-China, not only, but US-China trade tensions. AI adoption is growing. I think we had 30% of APAC businesses are using it, but leadership alignment is low. And then from a board point of view, boards are expected to lead transformation, focusing on strategy, talent, innovation, and responsible AI adoption. And then, as Holly alluded to a bit there, talent investment is key to improving customer centricity, emphasizing capability over capital. There's some headlines, but this was a snapshot from people that were at the retreat. As usual, it was a broad mix of C-suite, non-execs and chairs, and then sort of regional heads as well. I'll sort of leave it there. It really was a whistle-stop tour, so thanks for sort of listening into that. And if I can bring you in, Ian, now to sort of give your personal view, I guess, on the day and a half and how that's then impacted on where we are now and where we sort of see things heading. Uh, if you can sort of give us a bit of an insight, that would be great. And then I'd like to open up to some questions or some thoughts, comments, and we can sort of have a conversation between ourselves. So Ian, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Sure. Thanks very much, Michael. And needless to say that I enjoyed the day and a half, as usual. Extremely well run and very well attended. As you mentioned, there were a few people that arrived and then left rather quickly. And that really is a lead into my impressions, as it won't surprise you to know that I guess my main takeout from the retreat was certainly it was dominated by the US and, dare I say, the pantomime that was unfolding, especially, of course, around tariffs and reactions. And that, selfishly, of course, my being in Hong Kong and looking a bit north, and China economy was and is a focus for me. As well as the potential impact on Southeast Asia, and that actually came through quite a lot. So I'll mention it a bit. Now, of course, China's a lot stronger these days than 10 years ago or more, and a lot of this came through in the day and a half. That China's economy, of course, it's under pressure at the moment, but in terms of, I guess, maybe a bit behind what is happening at the moment, its strength and its the increasing amazing electrification, the EVs, the batteries, shipping, 80% of world shipping, drones, solar, building everything for everybody, rare earths, as we're monitoring at the moment. It's I guess some of it you can understand some of the motivation for what is happening from the US, but maybe not quite so much the method. But certainly China as a very strong and reactive competitor to US, and as a result, so I've been updating a bit on the what's been said on the APEC economies at that time during our retreat and since. We did note during the retreat that GDP growth is projected to slow significantly from projections. The figures that I had 2.6, 2.7%, something like that, but it had dropped a percentage. It's quite significant. I'm reading that reports say that although we did discuss a bit potential for recession, it looks like global recession may be unlikely now, but there's certainly more and more economic uncertainty. That came across in the retreat, but I think it's been reinforced since. And also what's been reinforced since is businesses have put on hold investment decisions, the launch of new services and strategies. And that affects not only goods, but also, interestingly, services, even though services are not necessarily a target for tariffs. So I guess what came across a bit to me was the retreat was a lot more positive than maybe I've read already or indicated already. A lot more positive than regional government expectations. And that certainly the economic uncertainty and projected by the governments is pretty high. Obviously, the escalating tariffs and retaliatory, the geopolitics. The smaller and trade-dependent economies are really vulnerable here, and a lot more prioritization on individual nations versus cooperation that was seen to be encouraged by the way the US was approaching it. Now, although the US and China appear to be quite proactive discussion at the moment, and other smaller companies are much less so. So I guess, and maybe what's come across to everybody already is that the whole thing has been a wake-up call in many areas for so many people, so many countries, so many leaders. And I guess what's come across is countries are recalibrating trade policies and trying to de-escalate trade tensions, maybe get on with each other a bit better, certainly looking towards China. Better management, perhaps, of monetary and fiscal policies. It's woken up so many people in this context, in Europe as well. A lot of this is similar to the retreat themes, for example, government structural reforms, adopting digital, promoting skills, and really putting effort into more and more multilateral cooperation. Just a bit of a follow-up on China, though. Economy is still under pressure. Of course, I think everybody's aware it still has major issues, particularly in some of the lower-ranked cities. Unemployment is still is an issue. Unemployment for young people is an issue, and so there are a lot of pressures that on China also that will affect the way it reacts and responds. Now, there were other things, as you've mentioned, of course, even though those things dominated for me. ESG, we did address it, and I guess I felt there was sort of 50-50 approach to it. ESG has taken a back seat in many of the West. I don't think it has so much in Asia, and that came across a bit in the retreat, but also China has actually continued to support quite strongly. And of course, you've already mentioned, the team have mentioned AI. Everything's AI is mentioned in the context of everything at this point, but certainly maybe a high level of lack of understanding of exactly what it means to people, to their businesses, including what they should be doing in terms of transformation, how to go about things. A better understanding needed at the board level and amongst executives, certainly, and maybe trying to simplify it for businesses that use simpler applications for enhancing your business. Don't try and change everything overnight. And I think some of that came through in the retreat also. So I guess they're my main takeouts. And as I said at the beginning, highly enjoyable day and a half.
Thank you so much, Ian, and possibly a bit more of a positive spin on. I was thinking about what the things I went through. It wasn't all doom and gloom. I think one of your points around the I guess the sort of temporary relief in the tariffs is that it might ease supply chain pressures, but the strategic planning, and I think the regional collaboration aspect of businesses sort of in the region saying, what are other alternatives to some of the supply chain that they have already existing supply chains, and how can they collaborate more and sort of more effectively. So I think there was a sort of conversations around, I guess, ASEAN playing potentially a larger role in buffering the region from future shocks as well. So there was some positivity there. Being based and being hosted in Singapore, obviously, there was the conversations around where does Singapore sit in this sort of China-US call it a trade struggle. Interesting pantomime maybe, but yeah, I think there's very much that sort of existential US-China relations as has been going on for a number of years. But I think some great themes to take out. Hopefully we'll all see you again at the next retreat.